The death toll rises among conflicting narratives and a crisis-ridden global economy. With no clear path toward ending the war on Iran, airstrikes continue while Israel further threatens Lebanon, Gaza, the West Bank, and Iraq. The U.S. wants a deal with Iran, but has the conflict come too far to prevent a worst-case scenario? I'm Andrea Sankey, and this is the Newsmakers. In typical Trump fashion, the U.S. president says Iran has one more chance at peace. After postponing a deadline to bomb Iranian power plants in exchange for reopening the Strait of Hormuz, Trump now says Iran badly wants a deal, and they've engaged in in-depth, detailed, and constructive conversation. Iran, however, says that's all fake news. So while apparently no one verifiably sits at the negotiating table, the U.S. and Israel continue devastating airstrikes, with their end goals still unclear. And innocent civilians are left to suffer, which some say is turning the tide in favor of the Iranian regime. Here's a look.
The war between the United States, Israel, and Iran is in its fourth week, with fighting continuing across multiple fronts. On day 25, strikes were reported across Iran, Israel, and Lebanon, with no sign of slowing on the ground. Over the weekend, US President Donald Trump gave Iran 48 hours to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, warning he could target its energy infrastructure. On Monday, he instead said Washington had what he described as very good discussions and extended that deadline by 5 days.
We've had very good discussions. Very, very good discussions, and you have to understand, I know my whole life has been a negotiation, but with Iran we've been negotiating for a long time, and this time they mean business.
Iranian officials rejected that claim, saying no talks had taken place and accusing Washington of trying to manipulate markets and buy time.
The informed sources in the highest authorities stated that no talks had taken place between Iran and the United States. Trump's pronouncement about these conversations is a lie.
The decision to hold off on energy targets comes as pressure builds over the global impact of the war, with the Strait of Hormuz still closed. Brent crude fell sharply after Trump delayed strikes and pointed to contacts with Iran, before climbing back above $100 a barrel as Tehran denied any talks. On the ground, Iran launched fresh missile attacks towards Israel, with interceptions reported and casualties in Tel Aviv. Israeli forces carried out further strikes in Beirut and southern Lebanon, where infrastructure damage and displacement continue to grow. Israel also reported strikes inside Iran, saying it targeted the Revolutionary Guard's main security headquarters, while residential areas were also hit. At the same time, Iran continued launching missiles towards the Gulf states. As the strikes intensify, some Iranians outside the country are openly welcoming the pressure, saying it is a chance to weaken the system.
We are hopeful and thankful to the Israeli and American forces for what they have done and continue to do so until the point where the IRGC forces will be obliterated.
But the impact of these actions goes far beyond their stated targets. Across Iran, civilians are being killed, caught in strikes on densely populated areas. Estimates suggest at least 1,500 people have been killed in Iran since the war began.
He had not come for the people of Iran. If he had come for the people of Iran, he could have taken many other paths. He could have lifted the sanctions. There are children who are ill and need medicine. Many of our needs depend on the sanctions being lifted. He could have done these things and proved his goodwill. People should never be deceived by him. No matter how much disagreement there is within a family, it doesn't mean you hand your own over to outsiders.
For now, the war continues, its impact rippling across the region and reverberating around the world, with no clear end in sight.
Well, joining me now to look further at the implications of the war are from the Iranian capital, Professor of American Cultural Studies at the University of Tehran, Zohreh Kharazmi. From Washington, Iranian-American lawyer and activist, Leila Mansouri. And from Lancaster, Professor of International Politics at Lancaster University, Simon Mabon. Thanks all so much for being with me. The lack of strategy combined with the killing of innocent civilians, including children, as well as the impact on others' lives around the world. I have to mention, we just saw the Philippines actually declare a national energy emergency over threats to that country's energy supplies. So, Simon, it's getting harder to see any good outcomes here. So summarize where you think things stand now. Who is winning what and who's been left to suffer for it?
Well, I think in terms of suffering, it's people across the world, people in Iran, people in Israel, in Lebanon, in Qatar, in Bahrain, in the UAE, in Kuwait, etc. People are the ones that are suffering most of all here, amidst the grand machinations of leaders around the world. And I think that's the real tragedy of all of this. In terms of who's winning, though, well, I guess it depends on what counts as a win. Is a win for Donald Trump, for example, opening the Strait of Hormuz, the straits which were open before the conflict started? Or is it facilitating regime change? Well, that seems increasingly unlikely now. What does it look like for a win for the Islamic Republic? Is it to stay as the Islamic Republic without regime change? Is it to put pressure on the global economy? What does it look like for Israel? There's lots of different questions here about who can spin the tale of victory. But amidst all of this, and I think this is really important, it's people that are paying the heaviest of prices.
As far as winners, very quickly, I mean, many argue that Russia is actually a winner. We just found out today that the European Union will now allow, they were supposed to cut off oil supplies from Russia by April 15th. They've now stopped that deadline. They will continue to receive oil from Russia. So good news, at least for Moscow in there, if you're a fan. But let me ask Leila, because on the issue of regime change, Leila, you are one of the voices who wants to see the Iranian regime fall entirely. You don't necessarily reject its overthrow, even via foreign intervention. So are you happy with what's transpired here? Is it just a matter of it having to get worse before it gets better?
Well, I'm not happy that innocent civilians and ancient sites have been damaged and innocent civilians have been killed. But the people in Iran tell me that this was the last solution. After the regime massacred over 40,000 of its own unarmed civilian populations that were protesting just in January, they were begging for foreign intervention. And they are still telling me that, well, the ones who can find VPNs that work, they come online and tell me that they still are supporting the war only if it means that the regime will collapse. They worry the most about the regime remaining in power and the war ending prematurely.
Let me ask Zohreh then, is that the feeling you're getting from Tehran? Is there a majority of people there that are just waiting for the regime to fall and it is what Iranians want?
Absolutely vice versa. What I'm seeing here is every single night, even during Ramadan, after feasting their fast, thousands of people in different cities and towns, and they continue to be so, of course, after Ramadan, coming to the main squares, chanting their support for the IRGC, for the Islamic Republic. And among them, of course, are the people, like, for example, women that are not even wearing a scarf, or they don't like to be the very firm supporters of the Islamic Republic. But now with the, facing and confronting the reality of the United States face of atrocity, indiscriminate bombing of the cities, killing and slaughtering people and children. You know that 300 hospitals and clinics are bombarded, 500 schools are bombarded. So even these people that may be sometimes relying on the West and the United States and were very much deceived by Iran International and the social media that is weaponized against Iran, now will know that they are confronting, and it's the actually idea that I'm getting from the Iranian cities and towns.
Leila, let me come back to you then. Do you accept the possibility that this action might not be weakening the regime as much as it is emboldening the regime and those more kind of extreme elements both in Iran and the region, as well as increasing nationalism?
I would just like to say that we are now on day 25 of an internet blackout in Iran. And anyone who speaks from Iran cannot speak freely. There is no freedom of speech or freedom of the press. So they will only allow narratives that fit their goals. And yes, maybe thousands do support them. 10 million support them, but 80 million want regime change. And you can go and see 10 million, and it looks like a lot of people, but 80 million inside, which is the majority, want this regime gone. And no, of course they are in the weakest they've ever been because their top leadership has all been eliminated. They've sunk over 100 Navy ships. They have no control of their airspace right now. How could they be emboldened? I don't think so.
Okay, let me go back to Simon to get more of an observer's opinion then, and what you make of the two polar opposite narratives we just heard there.
Yeah, I think that says a lot about where we are in terms of how to view this conflict. On support for protesters, I think the big question is if that was the real legitimate rationale for US and Israeli bombing, then why did this not happen in January or early February when it was the protesters were being killed by the IRGC? I think that's the fundamental question, and that's one of the things that makes me very, very suspicious about the true rationale for this campaign. Now, when it comes to what is happening on the streets of Tehran, well, we don't know exactly because there is this internet blackout. We know that there are levels of support that the Islamic Republic continues to have, even though there were tens of thousands of people killed during the crackdown earlier this year. The regime still does demonstrate a good level of support. And we've seen across history the idea that when a collective is attacked, then people rally around the flag. And that is perhaps what is happening right now. Although, again, it's very, very difficult to ascertain the veracity of some of these numbers. Do we know for a fact that 80 million people are against the Islamic Republic? No, we don't. Do we know that 10 million are for it? No, again, we don't. Because we don't have access to polling data. We don't have access to really get in and ascertain what is an accurate picture of the situation. What we do know is that there are still a huge number of people that support the regime, and there is still a large number of people that oppose the regime. Now, that all plays out in the context of an absolutely devastating bombardment that is led to the killing of civilians, that has led to the destruction of heritage sites, that has led to the destruction of schools, hospitals, medical clinics. And that is an absolutely repugnant thing to be seeing right now.
Zohreh, what do you make of what Simon has just described, and Leila as well, for the case that you stand for, that there is support for the regime in power, and that it is what the people want to protect against what they see as enemies in the United States and Israel? If it is the case, isn't the internet blackout, the fact that people can't necessarily speak freely, isn't that hurting your case?
You see, there are some native informants that I'm not sure that if they live really in Iran or not. Maybe they are the second or third generations of the Iranian immigrants to the United States or West after the Islamic Revolution. So they have fantasies in mind that they are selling their own fantasies to millions of dollars. Of course, they absorb from the United States government and bringing this miscalculation and chaos to the country partly is actually make the blood of these people to be at their hand. I'm just talking from inside the country. However, my narrative is not really considered the correct one, but those who are sitting in the United States, sitting in Europe, they're being doubtful or they are being confused with the situation is more relevant. It's absolutely nonsense. What I'm seeing here as a university professor, I have many students that are watching Iran International. They're very much affected by the Americans talking about the white saviors to come and save you, to try to represent the so-called regime that would be changed. But the fact is that Islamic Republic not actually being changed with the toppling down, with the assassination of the supreme leader, with the chain of commanders, that is, with the dirty hands of Israel. Israelis are actually assassinated. So if it is a regime, it should be toppled down. Why it's not toppling down? Why people are indicating this solid block of support of that? So calling the regime or making these propagations doesn't work. Believe it.
Okay, Leila.
I would like to say, why won't they have free elections and a referendum today? If they have free elections, then we can. What are they afraid of? Why won't they allow it?
We're far way off from that, given especially the state of the war right now.
Why should the established political system do a referendum? Why the United States, that have lots of internal domestic controversies, not making a referendum?
Have to come to Turkey every year to have their family reunions because they cannot travel to Iran. They've been banned or they'll be held hostage. Why not? We are talking about Iran right now, not any other countries. And the people want a free elections and a referendum. Okay, and this war could end if they allowed that.
As you say,
I myself have relatives in the United States and Europe. They're going and coming every year, seeing and having reunions with us.
Okay,
those people that you are talking about, they are treasoning the country.
Mrs. Kharazmi, are women allowed to enter your university without hijab?
And for its history,
I'll tell you what. I'd rather not debate the state of democracy in Iran right now, because all of that is in a state of war actually at present. I mean, we could have an entirely obviously separate program.
I have friends also that attend her university right now. There are students at her university with female friends, and they are not allowed to enter the university without hijab. The mandatory hijab is still enforced.
Okay, there was obvious dissatisfaction. We saw that in protests in the years prior to this.
That are sitting in my class without a scarf.
Some people, yeah. But let me ask you this, Leila, because as you make your case now, in the present, in the context of this assault on Iran, if you look at those who have been killed in Israeli and U.S. airstrikes, the problem is it really can illustrate how indiscriminate some of these strikes are, you know, from children to young Gen Z people. We saw influencers and bloggers, young women who obviously don't follow the religious hardliners being killed. So how does that help your case for allowing foreign powers to perhaps help the cause of democracy in Iran? Don't you worry about the blowback now?
No, because the people inside are telling us that they still support this because, yes, maybe 1,000 civilians have been killed. However, the regime killed over 40,000 civilians in 2 days. The people have tried time and again to rise up peacefully, and they are met with bullets. They are unarmed. What is the international community does not support them. The responsibility to protect should be there, and it's not. And the people feel like this is their last solution. They're not naive. They say they would rather be a puppet of the U.S. than a puppet of the Ayatollahs right now.
Okay.
They want normal relations with the world. They want to be a part of the banking system. They want to have a passport that lets them travel. They're tired of being isolated.
Let me turn back to Simon, though, to get an outsider's kind of opinion, someone who observes Iran very closely. We've heard that argued before. We just, as you've said yourself, we don't know how many people that opinion truly represents because there is no polling. But we do know there are most certainly two sides of the coin here, and that there is still a support base for the regime, as we're hearing from our guest in Tehran. So, Simon, I mean, if I can put it this way, do you see there being potentially dangerous similarities with the support base from the diaspora being similar to what we saw in the lead up and what unfolded in the invasion of Iraq? And that those who cheered the invasion were thoroughly convinced that Iraq could only get better if only Saddam Hussein were taken out. And then we saw the tragedy that unfolded and the unthinkable that really unfolded. Is that a concern now for Iran, or are they two completely different cases?
Well, they're two completely different cases. I think we must stress that Iran is very, very different from Iraq. But there are parallels in terms of the ways in which these military operations and these strategic plans have been taken forwards, let's say. There are similarities with regard to the vocal nature of diasporic communities that are advocating for a military-driven regime change. We saw that in Iraq. We're seeing that now from the diaspora. And I think just on the point about internal support for the regime, what we would have expected to see, I think, if the regime did not have the same level of support that it needed to survive, was a widespread scale of defections from senior military and political officials to the opposition, to opposition groups across the state in whatever way, shape, or form. We've seen that across other examples where the regime has started to crumble. We saw it in Syria. We saw it in Egypt, for example. We have not seen that in Iran. And I think that tells you something about the strength of the Islamic Republic today. But in terms of the parallels with Iraq, well, sadly, they're glaringly obvious. The lack of a UN mandate to support military intervention, the lack of a clear strategy, the lack of a quote unquote day after plan, if you will, for whatever was going to be involved. The pretense that this was being done for humanitarian reasons, the sort of cloud of nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction that is being used to justify military intervention. There's a lot of similarities, but the fallout from the Iraq invasion was catastrophic with regard to 250,000 people being killed immediately during the fighting, and then a further 600,000 or 700,000 being killed in the immediate aftermath, opening up of sectarian cleavages. Now, Iraq had a population of about 30 million and a very weak army, a very weak government system at that point in time. Iran is a very, very different state, 90 million people plus, very strong level of support for the IRGC. They are very, very different scenarios, and yet the similarities in terms of military planning and the political justifications for this are eerily similar.
Zohreh,
Andrea, we do have a transition plan. I'm sorry to say that.
you do, and I know you support the Shah's son returning, but
Yes.
many would say that that is a very minority of Iranians, even in the diaspora. I've been hearing. So yeah, I know that's your transition
plan. Over 1 million people come out for his call, and we
right.
have hundreds of experts supporting the transition plan.
Then I'll let Zohreh quickly respond to that, because every Iranian I've spoken to. Go ahead, Zohreh.
You know, the sort of illusions in minds of these people is ridiculous. We are living here. We are just breathing the earth of here. We are defending of the country here. They're sitting in the West, and they are talking about, for example, the regime change, the millions of people. The colleague says that Iran internet is absolutely blacked out here, and said we are aware that still people are supporting for example, this Reza Pahlavi to come back. How they know that when everything is blacked out, as you said? You know, some very few that are, many of them employed by the United States. They were armed with knives and arms, came to the streets in January. They were butchering people. They were blocking the ways of the cars. They slated actually the police forces. They fired banks and other public spaces. And those people who were just suffering from the economic grievances, that is very much for the economic terrorism of the United States and sanctions, were few that very soon separated from these mercenaries of the West. So everyone who is having a sort of a deep understanding of Iran's psyche and the atmosphere well understands that people are actually can never be pro-dictator regime like Pahlavi, that, you know, this Bahrain was just given by them to the Arabs to become a new state. They didn't have any sense of integrity. They were just, the Savak in Pahlavi was working well, trained by Israelis. They're torturing the Iranians' youth. So Iranians, even if think of regime change, would not be the replacement of Pahlavi. They are that ignorant.
That goes back to free elections and a referendum.
We have lots of elections every year. You may just go to see
Fake
that
elections.
the parliaments, the
Everyone knows
expediencies,
those are not real
many
elections.
different councils, even the city and village councils are chosen by the elections. And when people are taking part in these elections, means that they are supporting the Islamic Republic.
How
Okay.
can you run for office in Iran? You have to
I
be
think
a
that even
seems-
these people calling themselves lawyers,
Any
intellectuals,
any
they're
political
very
progress
much
or
actually under the media
transition,
propagation.
will not be moving forward, though very unfortunately, given the context of this conflict, it's going to take some time. So whatever progress could have been made toward a democratic end is unfortunately going to have to wait for now. But we can continue this conversation when we see how it does progress. And I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us, and hopefully we can speak about a more positive outcome in the near future. But for now, that's all the time we have. I'd like to thank our viewers for being with us. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.